Family, it's 8 o'clock. Y'all know what time it is. It's time to talk. Welcome back. We are here. We are here. And oh my goodness, do we not have a show for you today? The show, first and foremost, thank you to everybody who's joining from wherever you're joining from. Please let me know in the chat where you're joining from. But it is because of you that we're here. It is because of you that we definitely are able to do this type of content and bring this to you. It is things that y'all have asked for, and I'm happy to be here presenting it to you. Thank you to all my sponsors, IMP, Kazura, everybody that's been here from the beginning, RST Automation, Incision, everybody that's brought y'all content. I'm happy that we were able to do so. But season 7 is among us. And boy, oh boy, do we have some things in store for you for season 7. And we're going to talk about that a little later. But for this, I know at Sterile Processing, we are taught certain things. I know y'all seen the title of the study. Y'all seen the title of this episode. So we're going to talk into detail today about retained bioburden. And can that retained bioburden be considered sterile? There are many different opinions about it. There's many different theories on it. And today we're going to explore all of those with some of the experts from the business who have done studies on it and people who have been in this field and can tell you from a sterile processing standards perspective what that looks like. I am excited to get to the action. So enough talking with me by myself. Let me bring in the experts and let them give you their take on what retained bioburden means for the sterile field. First and foremost, I have Dr. Brian McGrath, who was a part of the study that actually presented, and it was printed, posted, peer reviewed, and it came about to say, hey, in this aspect, given these circumstances, we consider it sterile. Then I have the one and only Dave Jagrosse, who says, wait, hold on. What does that mean? So family, without further ado, I want to introduce to you Dr. Brian McGrath and Mr. Dave Jagrosse.
Hey, Kenneth.
How are y'all? Welcome to the platform. Welcome to Time to Talk season 7. It's been a great ride, and this season we're starting off with a bang with something that's on everybody's mind since the study was released. Everybody has some thoughts on it. So first and foremost, Dr. McGrath, can you introduce yourself to the family?
Yeah, hi everybody, and hi Kenneth. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for coming on, and because this is a conversation I wanted to have, and I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I've been so since 1993, so it's almost coming on my 33rd year in orthopedics. I have dealt with bioburden for all that period of time. We have an unbelievably great SPD department at our hospital and all our ASCs. People that do the hard work all the time and don't really get enough acknowledgement for what they do. So thank you for highlighting, and I love all the posts on LinkedIn on all those things where they really are, 100% part of the team. Actually built an ASC and I think, Kenneth, you've been there.
Yes.
Where everybody's on the same floor, right? So there's all one team, not just the operating room and SPD 3 floors below or 3 floors above, but everybody's on the same page because that's where everybody needs to be. So the beauty of having this conversation with you is actually to talk about what we looked at and something that was important to me, but I think from a different point of view than where some people took it and where they think, we're trying to decrease the value of SPD. Actually, I'm trying to elevate the value of SPD.
Okay. Dave, can you introduce yourself to the people who don't know who you are by chance?
Sure. And I had said hello, doctor, earlier. I was muted. I'm sorry. And hello to you too, Ken. Yeah, I'm Dave Jagrosse. I have been doing sterile processing for 36 years. So when some of the SPD folks on this call were born, I was probably doing your instruments. So, but I've been doing that for most of my adult life, and I have been everything from a technician to a supervisor to a manager to president of our HSPA, and I'm on 5 of the AMI working groups as a voting member, helping to develop the standards we follow. And I'm independent out here as a consultant, trying to help the profession move forward. So thanks for having me.
Again, welcome everybody. I would be remiss if I didn't say hello to our guests. I see Sean, I see Angie, I saw Angela. Welcome y'all. And yes, Angie, it's about to get interesting. Dr. McGrath, the world wants to know, based on the study, let's talk about retained bioburden. From the point of view of the study, what did that mean when you say retained bioburden potentially is sterile? I think all of us in sterile processing want to know what that means.
Yeah, so that's what I want to know too, right? So why did we do the study? So I've been doing orthopedics for like you, Dave, before most people are on this call were born. And the reality of that is, in the middle of my procedure, like some a hip fracture or whatever, countless numbers of times through my career, we have found bioburden in the middle of a procedure. And never once during that entire time have I ever sit there saying, okay, take everything off the back table, let's sterilize the field again with betadine, let's close the wound, let's get a whole new setup, let's wait for a couple hours for everything to come back up, and then we'll reopen the patient and then we'll finish fixing their hip fracture or their hip replacement. We just don't do that. So how much risk have we been putting these people at? So that was the starting point of this study. If bioburden is in fact present, what does it mean? So let's figure it out, right? So we've all been taught things, but I've been challenging things my whole career and saying, let's do the science on it. And that's what this study is. It's just science, right? There's no bias, there's no anything. But what I've been tired of is everybody saying that because we've always heard that if there's something that's retained, you cannot sterilize bone, right? You can't sterilize bone. Well, we know that's nonsense because we've been putting autografts and allografts in people for, my entire career, right? And infection rate of that is no different than infection rate from big metal, which is irradiated, for goodness sakes. And, so there's a certain amount of myth and there's a certain amount of reality and there's dogma. So let's take the dogma down and say, what does it mean? All our study said was if you actually do the front half of the house, right? If you do all the enzymatic cleaning, all the stuff that you guys put on those big, heavy rubber gloves for, and that's not to make it more sterile, it's so you can go home with your skin, right? When you put your hands in those baths and clean all the instruments and then put it in the toxic washers, that part of the process actually matters. Because all other studies done on bioburden and blood and everything else has just been allowed to be autoclaved. So the dogma is the only thing we can accept is that if it's gone through the sterilizer and the biologic indicators have turned, and we know that it went up to steam and temperature, then that means that the process has been complete. But if there's some level of bioburden or anything we don't expect down there, then we have to discount everything because we have to believe that nobody did their job downstairs. And to me, that's the nonsense part. You guys work hard. You care about what you're doing. And if no one else knows that, at least I know that you guys are dedicated to your profession. You care about it just as much and you're just as talented as the people upstairs in the operating room or down the hall from you on a one level area. So I want to know, and I wanted to challenge that and say, what happens if we actually do our whole job? Can we sterilize bone?
So I guess from our standpoint to what you just said, if you're doing your case and on your back table, they pick up an item and it has bone in it, that does not contaminate the back table, is what we're hearing. So let's back up one more portion of this. And what did we do in the study?
What we did in the study is we documented that every single portion of the process occurred. So if in your SPD department, and this is 2025, right? Not 1990, not 1990s, Dave, when you and I started, but in 2025, we have computer vision, we have facial recognition, we got everything. We can actually validate or certify that everything actually has occurred because you guys do it, right? But let's sit there and say in 2025, in my back table, and I know that everything has been certified downstairs and been from computer vision saying that every single part of the process has occurred, that I can sit there and say that a piece of bone that is laying free in my tray is sterile. My study would tell you that that is sterile. Now, you can sit there and say that's only one study and that doesn't change the universe, but it certainly begs the question of what should we do next to validate what I'm saying or discount it. I'm fine. Let's do other studies going forward on that. Pull that piece of bioburden out in every hospital and then culture it. But more importantly, I want to know what everybody does in 2025. If you have 30 trays that go into your autoclave, all blue wrapped, and there's a piece of bone that is contaminated and attached to a reamer or inside a cannulated instrument, in that same 30 trays, there's cardiac instruments and neuro instruments and everything else. So when that tray comes into my operating room and we open it up on my back table, and then we decide my back table needs to be taken down, who has ever gone into the neurosurgery room or the cardiac room and every other room that has had instruments in that same autoclave and decided they need to take all of those instruments off the back table?
Okay, so Dave, I want you to, it's a two-part. I want to save that second part because I like that second part. I want to get back to that second part about the complete load of the other instruments. We're going to save that for a little bit later during this conversation because that did come up in one of my trips here recently. So I want to make sure we do talk about that piece as well. But
that's good. And I see the comments are on fire already.
I'm going to get to the comments, but I want to have you answer the first part of his statement about if that did happen, where from a sterile processing perspective, what do we do in that scenario if that bone is found in that tray? Is that considered contamination?
Sure. And, again, for clarification, I'm not a nurse and I'm not a scrub tech of sterile processing background. But what I do know, being in this profession as long as I have been, when in doubt, we throw it out. And to qualify, I'm not trying to knock our profession. I'm the biggest proponent of it and supporter of it. But I'm out here working full time for a reason. My schedule is overbooked because there is a lot of things not being done properly. And yes, some departments have the best tools and processes, but for those that aren't in the SPD community, you got to understand that's why we're fighting for certification in every state to require it. That's why we're trying to get the resources and the recognition that goes with that. So there are challenges out in the field. I think the best way to summarize that is for example, when I work with some of the other medical companies out there, like Medtronic or some of these big guys, I work with their R&D teams when they're developing new instruments sometimes. And I explained to them at one point, because they asked the question, I said, look, I can take a pebble of sand or a piece of bone I could take anything and clean it and sterilize it, but that still doesn't belong in the patient's body. I still don't, if I knew it was there, number one, I don't have an IFU. It's not, I can't consistently do that in a consistent way without proper instructions. But if something did get through that process, yes, it's sterile. But as we know, we have to count everything on the table. I don't want to have foreign body reaction. I don't want to put something into the patient that doesn't belong there.
To that point, Dr. McGrath, one of the biggest things I heard and people have said to me when this came up is there's no IFU for bone. Like when we're cleaning and we have our things in sterile processing, there's no IFU on how to clean bone. So even if it's going through that first wave of processes in the sink, sonic, washer, all that kind of stuff, there's no IFU to say how to clean that. So how can we consider that still to be a sterile item after the fact if we don't even know or have any instructions on how to clean it?
Okay, so Kenneth, just to set the table here. What we're looking at is dogma that says you cannot sterilize bone, right? That's the
Okay.
dogma. You can't sterilize bone. All this study has said is that's not true. You can sterilize bone. Your processes actually do sterilize bone. What we did is we took T strainers, a simple, metal mesh strainer, put heavily contaminated 4 to 5 millimeter pieces, which is what we usually see in the trays, in there, and put it through your processes to say, is it possible, right? And we just loaded it, so we had every one of our sterilized loads had 12 trays. Each one of the trays had an equivalent weight and number of instruments in there to a normal load and per tray. And every one of them had a piece of bioburden in it that was gone through the same processes. And not only was the bone sterile, every one of the controls were in fact positive, and every one of the experimental pieces were in fact negative, and there was no cross-contamination. So as opposed to me sitting here saying, I want to rewrite the legislation, I want to rewrite your rules in SPD, that is not what I'm saying. But
Okay.
I'm saying that we spend millions of dollars of years, we throw away, just like you said, Dave, a lot of instruments and make people do a lot of rewashing of things that don't need to be. And we delay loved ones' surgeries. We interrupt their surgeries, all these things on a regular basis based on dogma. Let's break the dogma down. Let's actually figure out what that is. This is a first of many studies on this. And the reality is, if you want to take, and you should, and Dave, listen, I am not saying put the piece of bone you found in the tray and put it in the patient.
Absolutely.
Take the piece, but when that's in the operating room, get rid of that piece of bone, get rid of that instrument associated with, but remember that none of the other instruments inside of our sterilization chamber were in fact contaminated with that heavily contaminated piece of bone. So how much stuff do you have to throw away is another question, right? So
I guess that's real quick right there, that piece right there, sir. I guess that's the piece where everybody, has it. So if that tray is on the back table, all your instruments are there, that one tray has the bone, yes. But if your back table is contaminated, is it that where everything gets sent back to sterile processing? Because technically we have to break everything down. From your point of view of the study, you're saying we shouldn't have to, because if it went through the processes, we can consider that still a sterile tray.
Right. So there's the key element there, Kenneth, which is we need to certify our process. If you ask all of your family members who don't know exactly what you do, or what we do in the hospital, if you think there is actually a certification process for the sterility of our reusable instrumentation in the operating room, every person would say, of course, yes. But Dave, Kenneth, we all know there's a policy. There's no certification process, but they exist in 2025. So as long as you can certify that all those things actually occurred, and that's not a scan of the tray going through, it's actually recognizing it, seeing it, and then documenting that went through every one of those incredibly important processes in decontamination. If all that is able to be stamped and said that, yeah, all that's there, then yes, that bone fragment that you see can be discarded, or the immediately adjacent piece of instrument can be taken away. But there's no reason to break everything else down, but only if everything is certified. And Dave, I know you're shaking your head, and I am too, because it's very important to qualify my remarks with the fact that you have to know that all these things happen. But the idea that in 2025, we're going to sit there and say, because there's a piece of bone, one tiny fragment in there is almost not visible, right?
Okay.
That we're going to sit there and say that we don't believe the people in SPD actually did their jobs to clean this stuff and sterilize it is silly, and we should do better, and we should be rewarding the people in SPD, not penalizing with rewashing stuff. How many times have you been at Thanksgiving and your wife says, well, that's not quite clean enough. Would you clean that again? It's like, you get annoyed when your shirt's still wet, right? I mean, I'm being silly about that, but but the reality of it is that you do a damn fine job down there, and all we need to do is demonstrate that has actually been sterilized, right?
Okay, Dave. I do want Dave to comment on that, but Dave, we're gonna do that right after this commercial, and I want to
go ahead, Ken. We got business.
You got commercials.
I want to get your take on if it goes through the process, and how do we verify those processes to being able to say that bone is indeed sterile. I want to talk about that a little bit, because he did mention that it has to be verified that the rest of those processes did take place, and what does that look like. So right after this commercial, we're gonna talk about that.
In a world overflowing with noise, are you truly being heard? Or better yet, are you truly listening? Kenneth Campbell, industry author and expert in sterilization, is back with his latest book, Learn to Listen, so others are willing to talk. This book isn't just about hearing words, it's about understanding, connecting, and building trust. Whether you're leading a team, navigating relationships, or simply striving for better conversations, these practical strategies will transform the way you communicate. Imagine a world where every conversation leads to deeper connections, resolved conflicts, and greater influence. It's possible when you learn to listen. Are you ready to elevate your communication and create meaningful relationships? Learn to listen, so others are willing to talk. Available now.
See, we got real commercials.
That was pretty cool. I like that kind of.
Again, Learn to Listen, so others are willing to talk. Available wherever you get your books at. Definitely pick up your copy, and I got a signature waiting on you when that happens. Right before the commercial, we did talk about the front end process. Dave, can you speak to, is there certification for that? Is there anything that we can do to verify that other than what we do currently? And what does that still do for that piece of bone?
I mean, in our world, in sterile processing departments that are hospital based, we are not parametric release like industry is. We don't certify the process. We verify processes. We run tests that mimic, let's say on a washer, we run tests that mimic blood or challenges, process challenge devices. Same thing on the steam, but it's not anything like industry where it's that consistent. So Ken, if I can, just on the last two things, what I also want to point out is I'm active on 2 legal cases right now as an expert witness, and we do have to consider that in this sterile processing world, that there are standards, there's best practices, which are usually based on those standards and things that people develop, training manuals, SOPs, etc. But then that third bucket is the legal world. And if we deviate from those, then we start getting into some murky water. My biggest concern with what's being said, or what's been said so far, is this: robust processes have quality improvement or quality assurance built into it. When I see bone, I see anything go to the OR, something that's in a set that doesn't belong there, it's screaming that it's a defect. So that's my biggest concern here, is that maybe Dave was having an off day. I was being rushed. I was 6 call outs and I was the only guy on loaner trays. And now There's one of 9 trays with something in it that doesn't belong there. Are you willing to roll the dice and use the rest of those 9 trays, knowing that you already found one of my defects? So that's, under a quality assurance process, you would never release the rest of the batch if you find a defect.
So I think that's where this study comes in to play as to what he was saying is if we can go back now and say that you did all of those steps correctly from the decon to that portion going forward, then we would say yes, according to the study, that piece of bone would have been sterile, or that piece that shouldn't have been in there is sterile based on the process that followed.
Yeah, we assume it's sterile. Like even in our world, it's a sterility assurance level. We never get to 100. It's 10 to the minus 6. It's 99.99999. As you guys all know, it's never 100% sterile, even on our best days. But by nature, what we're saying is that's a defect. Not only bone in a set going to our customer, anything in the set that doesn't belong there is a major process deviation. It's a malfunction of our system. Not only did the decontam person fail, they missed something, but now the inspection process missed it. So we have 2 technicians that failed in protocol. And, it doesn't say in our policies and procedures or our standards that we could be 99% on target. Unfortunately, we've got to be 100% on target in certain areas. Okay, I had an extra Kelly clamp in there. That's sort of a more acceptable error. But when we start getting into things that can compromise the patient's safety, because like we said, I wouldn't challenge that bone in that particular study on those particular conditions isn't sterile, but it doesn't belong there. By nature, it's a defect, and it doesn't belong anywhere near that field or that setup.
Let me just make an announcement for the family. I see all of the comments. I'm gonna save room at the end so we can address a lot of them because they're coming in hot and heavy, and I can't read that fast for everybody. But I'm gonna get to a lot of those. Just one thing somebody asked, I do want to clear up for them. They said, for the people in the back, what is the difference between certifying the process and verifying the process, Dave?
Well, it's less certifying than we use the term validating. So manufacturers validate through, like when you put a medical device on the U.S. market, you use a lab like High Power. And by the way, High Power is a phenomenal lab. Love them. Worked with them for years. Visited them. But a manufacturer will do these studies that the FDA requires as part of that 510K clearance process. They have to do I make up a word, I call it cleanability. You have to do cleaning studies, and then they have to do the sterilization studies. That's the validation process. The FDA reviews all that and clears the device. When the device shows up in our department, we're not equipped. Certain hospitals in Europe, they're under pharmacy. They're run by PhDs. They do parametric release. It's a different world. But in the States, we receive those items, and to the best of our ability, we try to verify what the validation did. We try to mimic it as best we can. Look at the way this particular study was done. They inoculated. They took organisms and placed them. We have self-contained biological tests. We can't crack those open and pour them down lumens to do sort of our own studies. You can do those types of studies, but they're not typically done in the U.S. That I've seen.
Family, I see what y'all saying, and I think I'm going to do a part 2 of this just to invite some OR people because I want to get their take on this as well, just to say when they find it in the room, what does that do for them on the back table in the cases as well, just to get a different side of view, the point of view from the OR in this. But this is great. Just back to your piece. I just want to ask one question, and I want to go to the second part of your actual statement. So we find the bone. We say that is sterile. Now, what if that bone piece falls off of said instrument? is the area under that instrument still considered sterile? The area under where the bone was at, or because we've done the outside, but we didn't do underneath that piece. That was something that came up as well. So when that bone flake or that piece is removed from wherever it was stuck at, that area underneath never received or got touched by the enzymatic and all this stuff. So can we now still say that is sterile?
So Kenneth, you're talking about lodged pieces of bone inside an acetabular reamer, inside of a drill bit, inside of things, or wedged against something.
And then now it becomes unlodged, yes.
So let's divide that. That is what we did is we took pieces of bone and we actually put it inside of a container. The reason we put it inside of a mesh container is so we didn't lose the fragment. It also simulated more or less what you're talking about is something that's contained within another instrument. The entire portion of the mesh that it was within was also sterile. Okay. So, but back up. I and everybody on this is upset with the idea that people are thinking that I'm saying that if you grab an acetabular reamer and you pick it up and say that there's a piece of bone on this, and you're concerned that the portion of the bone that wasn't actually exposed to the enzymes, or that portion of the reamer that wasn't exposed to the enzymes within your decontamination process, didn't sterilize that undersurface, I'm not arguing with you. I'm also not arguing with you that if that's within a cannulated instrument that all this same things happen. I'm talking about bone that is free within the tray that's been bounced around this entire time, or within any other type of field that we're in there, that we're throwing everything out. Do we need to? And I'm also not saying that at this point in time, should we be changing the practices that currently exist. We do, however, need to start certifying, not verifying, but certifying that what we're doing has all occurred. And in that world, right, the world we should be living or driving towards, we can, in fact, make a different standard. And that standard will be better, not worse. It'll be more rewarding to people in SPD for all the work that they do. It'll also keep our patients and loved ones safer. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater because people are concerned that what they think I'm saying isn't what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that if bone can be, if it goes through the rigorous processes that you all do on a daily basis, it's sterile. But what Dave said is also accurate, which is when you see a piece of bone, you throw the whole thing out because you don't believe that anything actually occurred. So take that down, and we've talked about this before, I said it before, take that down to the ultimate. You've got some biologic that you can't kill. It's in one of the 30 trays that are all wrapped, that have all been cleaned, and they're in the same autoclave. Everything in that autoclave now, because every study that's been out there that's just autoclave will tell you that only 80% of the things in there you can actually kill. But none of us chase down all the other rooms that all the other trays go to currently. So we're already breaking the code that everybody wants to get all jazzed up about here. So let's really look at what we're doing. Let's put science on it and let's make it better, is all I'm saying. I did the study because I've done 30 years worth of, we find a thing in the middle of a case. I'm like, okay, let me find out if I think I've actually done any harm. And I can tell you that in all those cases, my infection rate is still the same, 0.02%, right? But remember, in our country, you spend $15 billion on surgical site infection treatment. So we should be doing better regardless, yes? And that's not just one person's fault, one department's fault, or anything like that. I just want us all to do something better.
Dave, to that point, and that's what I was going to get back to you, to what he just said. If we have a sterilizer and we have the rack set up, say it's 4 trays on each level, and out of that, it's a mixture of trays. You got ortho, you got neuro, you got some general, you got all this stuff in that load. To his point, in that load, one of the trays goes to said ortho room, and they find that piece of bone, right? Do we, from the industry standpoint, do we go back and pull those other trays that were on that load to say there was one tray in that load that had contamination. Is that a viable option to pull the other trays before it make it to the neuro, before it makes it to L&D, before it makes it to ophthalmology? Do those trays need to be pulled?
That would be more of a scenario where we have moisture, or what we commonly call wet pack. But there's never been any studies that have shown that an individually wrapped set that's on the upper left corner of that sterilizer cart somehow contaminated any of the other trays inside that set, whether it was in a rigid container or a blue wrap. There's just never been any evidence of that type of cross-contamination. And
Dave, that's only because we've never looked. And we also then sit there, get another scenario. Has anybody ever done a study that shows that I've got a contaminated tray on my back right portion of my table that has a fragment of bone in it, that the instruments in the front left side of my surgical table are then contaminated?
As far as like a sterile field,
right. I mean, to break it down the whole table.
But we throw it all out.
Yeah,
right?
Not my area of expertise, but I think that's what is different here. Also, there is, and I'm going to call it new technology. We're dealing with a pod, and the study deals with a pod. And I think the argument, and at face value, it looks like the study's done to say, look, if I have 10 trays in that pod and one of them is a defect, why can't I use the other 9? And my answer to that is exactly that. Thank God you found the defect now, because there isn't 10 technicians doing each one of those trays individually. It's the same individual. Humans are prone to error. That's why we have quality assurance in our departments. Clearly, the decontam had a defect. Clearly, the assembler had a defect. They allowed something to go to the OR or the theater that doesn't belong there. That's a timeout. That's a stop the line activity, because we don't know what. Ken, that's the answer to your question. We wouldn't pull things from that load on a scientific principle, but I would start questioning if there was bioburden in one tray and the other 6 trays on there were done by me. I would start to question the viability or the usability of those other trays, because they're suspect now, because I processed those at the same time. They pretty much went through decontam at the same time, and the same assembler inspected them. And if there's a defect on one, there could potentially be a defect on the others.
So 2 things about that, Dave. One is there's likely no defect. It just happens to be a small fragment of material that is almost escapes the human eye, or is trapped below something that you can't actually see at the time. And the second thing is, it's a specious argument. The reason that it's done in a pod, the reason we did it is because wrapping the trays actually decreases your ability to really fully sterilize them. By unwrapped trays, in every study that's been looked at, they're actually better sterilized because they get direct inoculation from the steam and pressure. So, and less of a water issue relative to, the evaporation of the water. It's not because of the pod or the SteriCube or whatever, or a one tray. It's simply a chamber. The pod, the SteriCube, the one tray, they're all chambers, just like the autoclave. But if you're going to say that a pod, a SteriCube, or whatever, because there's a piece of bone in one, versus you're going to say that you're not going to chase down everything in the autoclave that was done because it's done by different people, I would argue with you the fact that you don't have 16 people wrapping all your trays at the same time. You have 2 or 3 people at the most in even the busiest hospitals that are wrapping trays, and they're wonderful at it. That it's not calling their abilities into question. It's the process. We need a better process if we're going to sit there and say things are sterile or not sterile, but at least we should call it out for what it is, which is, because the current dogma is that if it's all wrapped and it's wrapped in a autoclave, it's different. Then I'm telling you that I think that's silly.
But I think what
no science behind it
is no one's arguing anything from a scientific standpoint. We could pretty much sterilize everything, but our quality assurance measures tell us that from a defect standpoint, that technician did these 3 trays at the same time, and I just found a major defect in one of them. I would pull those other trays potentially out of caution because this technician just had a defect. Scientifically, is everything in there sterile? Absolutely. Just go back to, like I said, that pebble of sand.
But I think,
but it doesn't belong
So,
in there.
Dave, are we going to have the whole person's day look like it's a sick day and take all their trays? I mean,
to the point, Dave, I think the part that we're trying to figure out is, to his point of, if we can go back and say the trays went through decon, and I think that's the process, and I want people to just talk about that. If the process was followed, and that piece of bone just happens to make it through the inspection process of the trays, it gets sterilized. When it gets to the OR, they open up that tray. It's on the back table. He has all 10 trays back there. You find that piece of bone. We can call down, get our strips, get our records, prove that tray went through the decon process. Is that bone enough to say, sir, you can't continue right now. We need to break down the back table, send all that stuff back to down, get a new setup while the patient's on the table. What I'm hearing is that he says, at that moment, no, the bone is sterile. I can continue with the case. We don't have to break all this down. That's what I'm hearing. But again, to his point, we have to verify that all of those other steps did take place.
Ken, if we, I know you want to take questions. I did have a couple of slides that I put together just regarding the study. So if you could leave me just like 3 or 4 minutes, I could run through those quickly.
So
right,
Dave, I have one question for you, and it's to me, it's paramount to why I'm here, which is, given the world of the 1990s and the first portion of this millennia, we have lived in a world that is currently said by all the dogma that we should do X. But if we can change that and make things better, would you want to do that?
Oh, by all means. I mean, I've lived through a lot of change, and there's a lot more on the forefront, but I think you have to be cautious calling current standards and practices dogma, because it could be dangerous. People could misinterpret this and use these types of studies in the wrong way. And that's right. What I'm.
Okay. So I've been practicing medicine for a long time, and you've been doing what you do for a long time. And no one just, fires at will, right? We take these things, we measure it, we figure it out, we try to move forward.
Right.
My point here is that we need to do a better job to certify that things are in fact gone through the entire wonderful process that has occurred. If that actually happens, then those things where we think is an error in judgment usually is not. It is simply something that people couldn't see. It is a rare occurrence. It happens 1 in 50 setups, these types of numbers, right? But it ends up being an incredible expense to everyone doing it. And is that a worthwhile endeavor to just tear it down? When in doubt, tear it down. When in doubt, throw it out. That's where I want to sit there and say, let's do something better.
Yeah. And
Dave, I'm going to save you some time. We're going to talk about your breakdown of the study. We're going to go over that. We're going to do that right after this commercial. Family, keep breaking the comments. We're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about all the comments and get to everybody and let them comment on the comments right after Dave shows us his critique. And then we'll get Dr. McGrath and Dave to answer your questions right after this commercial.
Thank you both.
if you're ready to find the new version of yourself, definitely reach out to UCDI leadership and go through the reset. It changed me and my trajectory on where I was headed. But definitely reach out to Sharon and the reset team over at UCDI leadership. Dave, I give you a few minutes to talk about going through the study, and you can explain what this showed and what the breakdown here is.
Ken, that commercial was awesome. Sign me up, and I would say put the link in the comments for everybody. That was good stuff. Yeah, I just put together a couple slides. I think we did put the link to the study in the comments as well for the audience out there. I can make these slides available too. It's just my feedback on the study and some of the things that I felt, why I feel like this study is a little dangerous. I just feel like, again, that it promotes complacency. Right now, it is a defect. It is a defect to have anything in those sets other than the instruments that are there. It's undermining the critical cleaning phases in decontam, and that's currently in our standards. It's suggesting, in my opinion, that the retained bone bioburden doesn't pose a risk. I feel it does. And it may encourage things to move faster, that if we don't trend and track these errors, that it's going to, it's not going to be as big a deal as it is now.
Real quick, Dave,
Sure.
Back up real quick to that last one. If I'm hearing what you're saying here, but to the point of what Dr. McGrath was bringing forth, I think that he's saying that all of these things still have to take place. That we have to be able to prove that the cleaning processes and all of that still took place. So we're not trying to shut down the first phases of the process. They still need to be verified.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not presenting this opinion from like, hey, we're at the standards group, let's water it down or let's change.
Right.
I'm talking about what I see out in the field, the pressure put on a voiceless department that constantly gets pressured to do things and cut corners, and we have no one to fight for us half the time, that things like this can push things in a very bad direction without us having a voice to push back on it.
Okay.
So can I comment on your
Cross-contamination.
slides?
I'm sorry, doctor. Go ahead.
Can I comment on your slides as you go through, or we ought to go back through them so I can comment on them?
If I could just roll through them,
Okay.
then we could
That's
jump
good.
back. Under cross-contamination, as part of the study, it assumes that the sterility of one tray ensures that the safety of all. That, hey, this, if this one tray is safe, then the rest are. At what level are we measuring the bone? Is it an ounce of bone? Is it a microgram of bone? Like, at what point do we say, that, like you said, one of 4 trays are on that set and we don't reject them? It just, it doesn't sit right with me. Again, it ignores that technician error. There's 2 technicians involved here. We had defects in decontam. We had defects on assembly. It doesn't take into factor the study, the fatigue, the human factors. SPDs are their own world. Anytime you do a study in a clinical lab, again, high power's the best of the best, but it's not your father's SPD. It's not the SPDs we work in. Same assembler, there's that same risk across multiple trays. Again, the real world SPD, you're in a lab controlled study, you got the human factors, you have equipment variability. People have different washers, people use different, there's so much variability in these departments that almost no 2 are practically the same. A lot of trays are overstuffed. We have separate podcasts on this. Vendors and SPDs sometimes mix and match these trays. So if you're testing a tray that's configured in a certain way and people have deviated from that configuration, can it be consistent? Just the risk of misinterpretation, again, that push to say, no, push forward, like we don't have to reprocess this. And now, are we cutting corners? Are we being pushed to do things that go against what the current standards are? You're using the porcine bone. It's not a full range of bioburden. Those test soils are definitely much different than what we encounter in our SPDs. The trays are unpacked, which in a pod, it's a little bit different. So, the tea strainers, for example, that's a pretty open basket. It's not a 4-level tray where something is buried in the heart of that complex instrument set. Again, it's just comparing it to real world. And then again, you're in that controlled lab environment. I think it sends the wrong message. That retained bioburden is acceptable, whether it is sterile or not. I mean, we reject trays if people's Sharpie markers have fallen into trays. People's, I've seen all manner of debris or items go into a tray, and those trays will be rejected because it's a defect. It contradicts our current standards. Sterility is probabilistic. It's not a guarantee, even under the best conditions. And now we're going to further challenge that. So will we be, is it at a 10 to the -6? Are we meeting the sterility assurance level, or are we lowering it? Normalizing debris. I mean, we don't want to desensitize defects is essentially what I'm trying to say there. These are the standards and references, and clearly 79 TIR 30, proteins can shield organisms. There's some ISO standards, validated cleaning instructions, and then there's a couple of studies out there that speak to this. So I listed them in here. And just on final thoughts, it's a best case study in a worst case industry. Sorry, guys, I'm not knocking us, but I'm out here full time, like I said, for a reason. There's a lot, there's a lot of things that happen in our profession, and I'm busy both from an auditing and from a legal standpoint, being an expert witness in court. It shouldn't guide the practice without caution, and probably sterile just isn't good enough. Again, I know it's cliche. When in doubt, throw it out. And to answer that question, you have to ask yourself a question. If that was you or a loved one on that case, would you let the sets go forward? And if you say yes on that, then good for you. But me, I would say no.
I'm gonna give Dr. McGrath a chance to say something there, but I want to talk about one thing you said there, because you brought up like the Sharpie falling in the tray and things like that. I did have a discussion I'll disclose that I had with Dr. McGrath about something similar to that, and what the main part of what he said was, we're talking about things that goes through the full process when you're talking about a retained something. So if we're talking about a piece of bone that was used on the previous case, or somebody did mention semen and all this kind of stuff, we're talking about things that came from the OR perspective of them using the tray, a piece of bone was left in, going through the full process. A Sharpie didn't go through the full process. Extra lot, these things falling in the tray. Now, those are truly bioburden, truly things that need to be rejected. He's talking about that piece of bone that fully went through the process, landing in the bottom of the tray. Do we need to break down the whole back table? That's where part.
And another common one is like a knife handle, like a number 3 knife handle blade. Like we know we can clean that. That's not supposed to be there, but currently, like I said, if we call it dogma, but I call it best practice and current standards, but that's going to be rejected because that blade didn't belong in that tray, and that's screaming that it's a defect. Whether you want to roll the dice, like I said, and assume that isn't any other defects, we could talk about sterility. See, I think a study like this comes in handy if you were arguing something in court, maybe, or trying to say something is sterile or not sterile, but it still just doesn't belong on that. The jury would look at that and say, at the end of the day, whether it's sterile or not, it's a defect. It doesn't belong there.
So in that same token, Dr. McGrath, to the points that Dave made, do you want to comment on any of that stuff?
Yeah, sure. Dave, can you back to your first slide? That's kind of the essence of everything in there.
Yeah.
First, as you're pulling up, I'm not arguing against you.
Got it, Ken?
And I'm not trying to short sheet the bed or shortcut the process. When I look, the next one with your squares, right? There you go. So promote complacency. It absolutely does not. We did not do idealized circumstances. We simply did everything that you all do on a regular basis and daily. Undermines critical cleaning phases. It does not. I want those. I want those in droves. Those are incredibly important. Suggest routine bioburden doesn't pose risk. Hey, frankly, it doesn't suggest it, it states it. If that bioburden has gone through the process, that bioburden that is freely present and visible is sterile. Don't care what anybody wants to say. That's not arguable. Your other three squares are, but may encourage a skipping visual inspection. That's not it at all. All this study is saying is that you actually can sterilize this stuff. What I'm suggesting from this, and I love the discussion, is let's take it the next step. I don't want to change your processes now. I don't want anybody to take this and put it in their back pocket and say, I can do less and be okay. I don't want hospitals to say,
Right.
You don't need to do your whole job. I want us all to sit there and say, let's figure out what the right thing is. And at least we need to do something that certifies all the wonderful work that you guys do in SPD. We don't do that.
Absolutely. And the more studies, the better, because there's really is a big lack of that in our profession.
Right. But I just tell you, this study was not particularly expensive, and it was something that I cared about, right? I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I've got a ton of studies. You can look at my CV, the stuff I do, the things I'm willing to spend my time on are things that I care about. And this is one thing kind of at the autumn of my career that I really wanted to make sure that I was right about, and that what you all do, and this is something after building a couple SPDs for ambulatory surgery centers, it became critically important to me to understand the whole process and how we put that together. That stuff that you guys put all this debris through is incredibly toxic. It will kill anything. And I've seen the comments down there and all that, and about proteins and proteins hiding things and all this stuff. Let me tell you, nothing hides water or fluids. It goes through everything. But if something is locked onto a surface, a piece of bone, a piece of cement or whatever, the undersurface isn't seeing it because it's trapped away, right? It's a vacuum underneath there. Not what I'm talking about. But I want to continue the conversation, and I want to make this process better for our patients, not decreasing all the great work that you all do and not cutting corners. I want to increase it and increase the visibility of it.
Sure. And Doc, I don't want to imply that you have any kind of anything other than that, because ultimately we all know and respect that the doctor ultimately makes the call in the field, because this does happen. And if there's gross contamination and there are those other 6 trays, the doctor has to weigh, like you said, keeping that patient under anesthesia for an additional 2, 3, 4 hours, or like what event you have to make that call. And we know that rests with you, but we don't want to normalize that. That's really the thrust of what I'm saying.
So just so y'all aware, I do want to get to some of the comments just so y'all can give a few takes on things that people are saying. Family, y'all showed up tonight. The comments are definitely out here, and there's a lot that I've seen. And I think one of the biggest things I've seen that came through this whole thing is that people are welcome to more studies. People are welcome to seeing where this goes and seeing what we can change about the industry through the science and through the studies. So they are very much into going further into these conversations. And yes, we're gonna, family, if y'all want to see part 2, let me know. And we're gonna have to get a little bit deeper into these and get what pockets we can go into to find out what studies need to be done. I see people volunteering to be a part of studies, and that's where you see the industry coming together to forward the business. And that's where I see we're at. Just for y'all, just so Juan says, this is a promising foundation. I appreciate the direction it's taking. That said, further research is essential to deepen our understanding and validate these early insights across broader contexts. Again, people are wanting to do this. Jonathan, hey John, we always have to assume a worst case situation until enough data is generated to change the paradigm. Again, that's what everybody keeps saying. We don't have enough data. We don't have enough data to Dr. McGrath's point, let's do the studies. To Dave's point, let's do the studies so that everybody can see what's happening and we can, kind of move the needle a little bit. If I can get more comments up, more text here. Sean says if the trays have a proper barrier and met all the sterilization parameters, the last line of inspection is the surgical team. If no debris is found on the trays processed by said SPD technician, then they know they shouldn't be pulled. Also, I could argue that because you're pulling a vacuum in the sterilizer, that one can't guarantee where the debris came from. Hence, why would I challenge saying we could use the remaining trays in the pod that were absent of debris? Sarah, I don't think anyone would say or agree with freely continuing to use trays found with defects, but it is interesting to understand the true impact or probability of causing infections. And I think Dr. McGrath said that the rate hasn't changed with these type of situations. But again, a study on that. What does that look like for the infection rates going up or down? What else we have here?
Kenneth, within that, the one comment that talked about the pod, the idea of the autoclave itself is the container. When we put all blue wrap trays in an autoclave, it is essentially a very large pod or SteriCube. The vacuum then sucks all the fluid from all of the trays down to the central drain, contaminating everything within there. If we're assuming that there actually is contamination risk within whatever is in any of the trays that we're going to throw out, we don't do anything about that. So I want to take the conversation away from multi-tray sterilization and think about the autoclave as being a multi-tray sterilizer.
So again, family, is that a study that we need to look at? If there's a contamination in a tray, we're saying that piece of bone shouldn't have been in a tray, and that tray was blue wrapped. With the other 10 trays that's in the sterilizer, if that steam is penetrating all the blue wraps and that contamination is in the blue wrap, his point is, do we look at all the other trays in the sterilizer to say, if that tray was contaminated with the vacuum that was created and the steam being pulled, are the other trays contaminated? And I know Dave said there was no study on that and there was nothing out there about that. Is that something we might need to look at given what we're saying about the multi-tray sterilization? If that is considered the situation, is that a study that potentially needs to be had as well?
Yeah, I mean, that scenario would assume that any contamination would have to penetrate back out through either the blue wrap or the rigid container and then cross-contaminate the other devices, either in a physical state or somehow if it aerosolized, which, as we know, those autoclave cycles are very aggressive.
But Dave,
is that a thing?
The autoclave doesn't kill, and you know that from every study that's been done on it. If you have contaminated blood, it's dried on an instrument. It not only remains contaminated, it will contaminate within its own tray. And the blue wrap is porous. You pull the water through it, you pull it out of it, you pull it through it. So saying that it's not going to be pulled through from somewhere else that's just a hypothesis that doesn't have any, not to be cute, but doesn't hold water.
Pun intended.
Pun definitely intended. But that's the idea of the drain in the center of the autoclave. It's pulling it all through a central source. But I don't want to drag us down that rabbit hole.
Right.
I see
your
point.
That could be a different study. I think that could be probably a different study that can be done just to get to that point. Like you said, the wrap is porous. We've talked about it. The steam is pulling through. So if there was a contamination on the top level, did it get pulled down
directly under it? Yeah.
Right. So is that a potential hazard there? But I agree. I've never pulled other trays from a load once contamination was found in the OR. I can say as a director, I've never done it. So I don't know if anybody else has. Maybe y'all can say it. But Lila says, what are the risks for the patient? Because I'm sure the outcome is not traced.
She's 100% right.
Absolutely.
We don't keep track of those records.
What else do we have? Do we have anything else there? Angela, it should be considered contaminated until there's sufficient research and evidence to back up the claim. Oh, that went away too quick. Is this study only related to bones, or does that include cement, other bioburdens? This is going to open Pandora's box that we aren't ready for. If we're saying it's just bone, or is it cement, or is it other things in the tray? I think the study was just the bone.
Only bone, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, just bone. There have been a study with cement out of HSS a few months before this study, looking at the same thing and finding the same results.
Okay, so there are other studies out there. Lisa says, even if the bone was sterile, it creates a reservoir for microorganisms that will continue to grow, since the sterilant can't penetrate through the bone to get underneath it and kill the microorganisms. The entire tray then becomes contaminated as the microorganisms continue to reproduce. So, I mean, it's a lot.
That's a lot to unpack, but the reality is that we're talking about a small fraction in time, and
Okay.
the contaminants on the bone are actually, it's immersed in the contaminant. And the concept here is, why can't you sterilize bone? It's because of multiple interstices within its surface. It's so porous. But that was the whole question in the beginning. And when you put it through immerse it in a acid bath, which is your decontamination process, it kills the surfaces. It kills it penetrates everywhere within it. But if it is a core of a diamond that has something inside of the diamond that's not exposed to the outside, nothing's getting to that. But then again, that's not getting out either.
Well, hopefully we're not using an acid bath. We're doing neutral enzymatics, according to IFUs. But
oh my God, David, are you kidding me?
Cleaners
I just built an ASC, and you cannot connect the drain from the sink that you guys use to the plumbing in the floor. There has to be a space between it for the evaporation of the gases that are created. That stuff is not neutral.
And particularly if you have a cart washer, they tend to put alkaline to shine up the steel, but
definitely, I think we're gonna have a part 2 to this study. This episode. There's so many different ways this could go. Hey, family, the study, if you want to read it for yourself, we did put in the comments. It is a link to the comments so you can see it, just to make sure that it's there. Family, we appreciate you all. Dave, can you tell the people how to find you?
I'm out there. Jump on LinkedIn or davidjagrosse@gmail.com, and I'm always there if you need help or guidance.
Dr. McGrath, if people want to talk to you about the study, how can they find you, sir?
I'm on LinkedIn at Brian McGrath. I'm also through Northtowns Ambulatory Surgery Center, UBMD Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, or and I'm on email at bem4@buffalo.edu.
Family, that's been our show tonight. I appreciate all of you for showing up for the industry, showing up for this discussion. We're definitely going to keep this conversation going. It's been a time to talk. Same time next week. Family, I appreciate you. See y'all soon.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Dr. McGrath.
Thanks, Kenneth. Thanks, David. Have a great night. Bye-bye, guys.
In a world overflowing with noise, are you truly being heard? Or better yet, are you truly listening? Kenneth Campbell, industry author and expert in sterilization, is back with his latest book, Learn to Listen, so others are willing to talk. This book isn't just about hearing words. It's about understanding, connecting, and building trust. Whether you're leading a team, navigating relationships, or simply striving for better conversations, these practical strategies will transform the way you communicate. Imagine a world where every conversation leads to deeper connections, resolved conflicts, and greater influence. It's possible when you learn to listen. Are you ready to elevate your communication and create meaningful relationships? Learn to listen, so others are willing to talk. Available now.